Yo, what's going on? This is Talk Sports with Keem, and today we're going to speak on Howie Roseman, right? The great Howie Roseman. How did he get to where he became? Some of his ups and downs, and also his maturation to finally building and constructing teams the way he do right now. So it was definitely a journey for Howie Roseman. He didn't start off being the it guy. For those longtime Eagle fans, y'all know that Howie didn't always get it correct, right? And Howie was here in the Andy Reid era and all of that. So let's break it down. Let's get right into it. And let's talk about Howie Roseman, the man, the myth, the legend. So, Howie Roseman first popped on the scene in 2000. He was just an intern under the staff and salary council, right? The salary cap council. He didn't work his way in there, maybe unpaid. It doesn't really say, but when I assume intern, I assume unpaid. So he worked his way up the chain through those 3 years. And after those 3 years, he was granted or achieved the role of director of football administration. And that was in 2003. So let's pause right there. Let's take a minute and put together what was happening in 2003 with the team. So in 2003, between 2000 and 2003, remember, we were going on a run to the NFC Championship for 3 straight years. We couldn't get over the hump. First, it was New Jersey, and then they lost to the Ravens. They got blown out. And then after New Jersey, it was the Rams. And then after the Rams, it was the Tampa Bay Bucks. And then after the Bucks, we finally got over the hump in 2004 and went to the first Super Bowl facing, of course, the New England Patriots, right? We all remember that story. This is the T.O. year. Donovan McNabb and T.O. not really getting along, but they're putting their feelings aside to actually perform well. T.O. breaks his ankle and performs a hell of a Super Bowl game, over 100 yards, 10 catches on a broken leg, right? We all remember the story. At this point, Howie does not have full control of the roster. So his movements are very limited, right? His impact is very limited. He's more so worrying about the contracts and how they're constructed at this time. It wasn't until after we fast forward a little bit where he gets some of the control of the roster. So we see after 2005, that's when the team kind of imploded and T.O. was doing sit-ups in the driveway and different things like that. After 2005, Howie gets promoted to the vice president of football administration. Now, this is 2006, 2007. At this point, he's not really in control of the roster still. He's more so handling the entire operations of football, right? How is it working? How are the contracts working with the players and the staff, right? So stuff like that. He's not really on, taking control of the scouting and bringing in his type of players just yet, but he's moving up and he's matriculating. At this point, Andy Reid still has majority of control and putting the actual roster together. It wasn't until about 2008, 2009 where Andy Reid, he starts to regress a little bit. I believe his father passed away and that took a toll on him. And then at that point, our record starts to slide a little bit. We go through an 8-8 season, and then after the 8-8 season, we take a little decline and do like a 4-12 season. And this is where Howie Roseman is promoted to vice president of player personnel. Now, in 2010, 2009, all the way up till about 2012, he's actually constructing the roster, but he has to co-manage it with Andy Reid. So at this point, he has a little bit of say, but Andy Reid has the final say, right? And so we don't really see how we fully take control of putting a team together. But what I will say is how we learned a lot. He got building from the trenches, this mindset that we all know right now. We build our team inside out. So we start with the trenches, offensive line and defensive line. That came from Andy Reid. And so he took that and put it into his system. And now we see the maturation of what that looks like today. So that's an important part to know about Howie Roseman and where that actually came from. It actually came from Andy Reid. And then we fast forward a little bit. Howie Roseman gets fired. Andy Reid gets fired, parts ways, take a year off, and then goes to Kansas City, where we all know the story. And he's won over 3 Super Bowls, and kudos to him. But now comes in Chip Kelly. And believe it or not, the very first year with Chip Kelly, Chip Kelly didn't have full control. It was still a little bit of Howie, but then Chip Kelly comes in and he's reinventing the wheel of how to play football. You got that fast up-tempo offense. He hires Joe Davis as the defensive coordinator, who was really just there to fill a position because our defense was very, very bad. And Howie is in charge of getting him his guys, right? But then he goes on his 10-6 run and, I guess he undercuts Howie, talks to Jeffrey Lurie and gets Howie out of there. Puts Howie on the other side of the building where he doesn't even get to see the players. He's more so with the accounting staff and all of the things that have to do with basically the operations of running a business, not really the management of a football roster. And so after this, Chip Kelly goes on his whole documentary scheme of getting rid of players, and that's a whole thing I can touch on in a different episode. But he goes on this scheme, gets rid of all the players, trades Shady McCoy for Kiko Alonso, bring in DeMarco Murray and Ryan Matthews, get D-Jack out of here. Riley Cooper with an egregious racist slur, and then promotes him to wide receiver number 2, so on and so forth. I can keep going. But nonetheless, he has back-to-backs 10-6 season. So say what you want about Chip Kelly as a person and as a manager of personalities in a locker room. He is a good football mind and a good offensive football mind. As you can see, what he's doing, what he did at UCLA, what he's doing now at Ohio State. And then, I think he just got a new job, but whatever. I don't really keep up with Chip Kelly these days. That said, after two back-to-back 10-6 runs, he goes on to 8-8. And after that, the roster changing and everything like that, and Jeffrey Lurie giving him power for that 1 or 2 years, basically the team implodes and he is out of here. Introduce Doug Peterson, right? So we go from a drastic mainstay in Andy Reid. Then we try to get kind of a new Andy Reid type of coach, type of guy, someone who's going to reinvigorate the football spirit here, someone who is fresh-minded, someone who is very offensive, has an offensive philosophy here. Bring in Chip Kelly, it doesn't work, it flames out. We get rid of him early because he pretty much ruined what could have been a dynasty offensive team. And then after that, we bring in Doug Peterson. Now, Doug Peterson, mind you, this is a little bit of a Howie and Jeffrey Lurie coming together to pick this. So just think of the mindset of these people right here, Howie and Mr. Lurie. They just got burnt by Chip Kelly, who was a high-profile coach and someone who wanted to have the entire roster building autonomy. Then they go in to get a complete opposite, someone who we want to get back to as close to Andy Reid as possible, but we don't want a big name like that to give him all the power. So who can we get? Insert Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson was a high school coach, did 1 year of OC with the Kansas City Chiefs. Got that job, did a good job, wasn't really calling the plays, obviously, that's Andy Reid. But then we put him as our head coach. Why? Because he's kind of that guy where he's not going to take it. He's not going to demand any autonomy with the roster. So we insert Howie Roseman back to his general manager position in 2014. And now it's time to ball, right? 2015 is where Howie has his full autonomy on how he wants to run the team. Now, let's get into his ups and downs of roster management. So here's a list of our 2015 draft, right? So let's get into about Howie's Roseman mindset and what he was looking at when he took these players. First and foremost, he was big on intelligent prospects, right? He was big on high character prospects, even if it lacked a little bit in the athletic department. He wanted people that went to smart schools like a Stanford. He wanted people that were high IQ and high character. Those were the traits that Howie Roseman prioritized when it came to picking his draft picks. And we had the first one with Nelson Aguilar, right? So you look at Nelson Aguilar, yes, he had a good football career in college, but he wasn't that it guy. There was a lot of it guys coming out of that draft. Bashard Perryman, who was bigger, faster, stronger. Now he did flame out, and Nelson Aguilar is having a better career. But when it comes to the first round draft pick, do you label him as a bust? Me necessarily, I don't fully label him as a super bust. And here's why. Nelson Aguilar has had a long career. He's found his way in the wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 role. Yes, that could be considered bust territory. But when he was with the Eagles, he did have a good year, like a good first year. He had hand problems, we all know. Aguilar, we know that meme. He definitely had hand problems. And so was he a bust with the Eagles? Yeah, but is his career a bust? I would say not. He's having a long career. Eric Rowe. Now, Eric Rowe was a guy who could play cornerback and safety, right? Coming out of college out of Utah, he was multi-positional. And this is something that Howie Roseman still to this day prioritizes and likes in players. So he was a high IQ guy, good character guy, and could play multiple positions. And remember, at this point, Howie doesn't really like investing into the cornerback position. So remember when we got Byron Maxwell, and I touched on a couple of our defensive coordinators with Chip Kelly. We got Byron Maxwell because Chip Kelly specifically liked cornerbacks that can play cover 3 that were 6 feet and taller, right? So if you go a little bit deeper into that, Howie Roseman took that trait and said, you know what, I need to define what type of players, not only intellectually, but what type of players, what type of body frame do I like when it comes to picking these players. I like tall, longer corners with long arms who run fast and have a little bit of weight on them so they don't get manhandled around, right? Insert Eric Rowe. Eric Rowe was a good player who can serve as cornerback 2, cornerback 3, safety number 2, can even play spot in the safety 1 role. We all know that. Yes, he flamed out at Philadelphia again. To me, I would say we weren't using him correctly because he did have good careers, and I think it was New England, so on and so forth. All right, so Jordan Hicks. Again, Jordan Hicks, not the best linebacker prospect in the draft, but went to Texas. Very good, high IQ, very good character, fast. Again, something in the mode of Kiko Alonso, a fast linebacker who can run sideline to sideline. So now you can see Howie Roseman is starting to take these pieces and say, okay, I like the traits that Chip Kelly bought. I don't like Chip Kelly, but I like the traits that he bought. I like fast linebackers who can run sideline to sideline, right? Then you got Ja'Cory Shepherd, cornerback, flamed out. Don't even remember him. Randall Evans, quarterback. Not really somebody that I remember. I know he stuck around for a couple years, but I don't really remember him. Now, in this year, Doug Peterson is getting his mold right. We're coming off of a season where it's not too good. And this season would go 7-9. I don't know why I just clicked all them ads. But in this season, we went 7-9. And so it's time now to find our quarterback. Remember, we was coming off of Michael Vick, Nick Foles, Kevin Cobb, that whole experiment. It just didn't work. So remember, I believe this is the first time that Howie was really aggressive. He traded up twice this time, traded to Sam Bradford, and then traded again to get up to number 2 to take Carson Wentz. A bold move. Who was really good. Carson Wentz, a high IQ guy, didn't come from the biggest school, but he was in the mold of a, let's say, Andrew Luck type of guy, right? 6'5", big frame, could throw the ball, could run a little bit. Going back to, and I don't know this for sure, but just looking at it, Howie Roseman came in with Donovan McNabb. So if you look at it a little bit, and you could say, okay, Carson Wentz could remind me of the success that we had with Donovan McNabb. So let's go and get our guy, right? We did everything we could to get our guy. We insert Isaac Seumalo, who, again, at this time, we have Jeff Stoutland. So Jeff Stoutland really knows his picks, really knows his O-line, really knows what he's looking for. So when it comes to offensive line, we like very big tackles, 6'5", 6'6" type of tackles, 320 plus type of tackles. You look at Lane Johnson, Jason Peters, Jordan Mailata, right? And then we like guards who are almost just as big, 6'4", 6'5", 300 plus, but manhandle people. You look at Brandon Brooks that we traded for. You look at Landon Dickerson. Isaac Seumalo was in this same mold, right? Big, solid guy. Wendell Smallwood, okay, a running back that we needed because we had no running backs, right? Our running backs are pretty much flamed out. DeMarco Murray is out of here. Ryan Matthews is out of here. Insert Darren Sproles and Wendell Smallwood. Halaputi Vaitai, which was a 6'7" swing tackle out of TCU, who was very good. He was supposed to come in and kind of take over the reins of the Jason Peters, learn under him for a little bit, and didn't work out. We actually got Andre Dillard a little later, who we thought was going to work out as well, but Vaitai really never got his shot. And when he did get a shot, when Jason Peters was down, he filled in okay, but it wasn't really the best that we needed. So there was time to make a pivot. As you can see, it starts to have a pattern here. The Eagles and Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie are quick to make pivots. They know what they want. They know what they're looking for. They're quick to identify if it works or doesn't work and then make a pivot. So at this point, we're still getting high intent guys, high IQ guys who don't necessarily come from big athletic SEC schools, right? A lot of these players didn't come from SEC schools. Insert Jalen Mills, right? Insert Blake Countess, two cornerbacks, two back-end safeties who are finally in the SEC. Howie Roseman didn't take a lot of SEC players back then because SEC players are bigger, faster, stronger, yes, but not necessarily the highest IQ or not necessarily the highest character. Don't blame me. That's just the perception that's out there, right? So when it comes to Jalen Mills, remember, he was supposed to be a high draft pick. And because he had a leg injury, I believe it was a knee injury, it kind of set him back. And we were able to get him in the 7th round. But if he never had that leg injury or knee injury in college, he for sure would have been at least a top 3 draft pick. Would Howie have spent the money there or spent the draft pick there to take Jalen? No. So for me, it was a big gamble and it paid off because Jalen Mills at a 7th round pick gave us multiple years of good serviceable football. And that's what you're looking for. Howie Roseman loves to look for value. Even to this day, he loves to look for value. Now, let's go on a little bit more and fast forward a little bit. Because at this year, we go 7-9. Next year, we go 13-3 with Carson Wentz. Yes, he do get injured. We still have Nick Foles. We all know the story. We go on the run. We win the Super Bowl. But let's talk about how that team is constructed. So I want to pause this, and I'm going to come back when I have everything uploaded about that Super Bowl championship team. So at this point, it's really safe to say that Howie don't have any drafted mainstays on the team. You look at Lane Johnson, that came from Chip Kelly. You look at Zach Ertz, that came from Chip Kelly. You look at Jordan Hicks, who was on the team during the Chip Kelly era. You look at, trying to think of some other ones. Jason Peters was a trade that happened prior to Howie Roseman getting full ownership of autonomy of the roster construction, right? So a lot of the mainstays that were on this team, Brandon Graham before Chip Kelly and Howie Roseman, Fletcher Cox these are Andy Reid guys, right? And so when you look at the mainstays, Howie Roseman don't really have a player that he could point to and say, that's my guy that I got and I groomed him and now he's a superstar on this team, right? So we can look at it. Nelson Aguilar, right? This is Howie draft pick, bust. Halabuti Vaitai, Jason Kelsey is an Andy Reid guy. Brandon Brooks, trade. Lane Johnson, Andy Reid guy. Vinny Curry, Timmy Jernigan's, who I like. This was a Howie guy, but, he wasn't the it guy. But he was a good player, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Michael Kendricks. This was actually a Chip Kelly guy. Jordan Hicks, Chip Kelly guy. Nigel Bradham was a signee of Howie Roseman on a cheap deal, right? So we got Stephen Wisniewski, cheap deal. LeGarrette Blount, cheap deal. Alshon Jeffrey, cheapish deal, right? Ronald Darby, cheap deal. Rodney McLeod, cheap deal. These guys are stopgaps. So in this time, Howie Roseman, and remember, this was the oldest roster in the league at this time on average. Howie Roseman said this, you know what? We have a good stud quarterback. Let's put expert, experienced players around this guy on cheap deals and around our studs that are on cheap deals. If they work out, we can re-sign them. If not, we can let him go and plug and play next year. So this is kind of the formula that we're seeing now in this offseason, where we're signing Azeez Ojulari, Jeff Uche. This is where that came from. And this process built us a championship roster, right? And yes, when we talk about Howie, when he used to say he loves to commit to players a little after, it's time for them to roll out. This is where we get that, because we've seen after the championship, he re-signed Sean Jeffrey, which shouldn't have happened, right? A lot of these players, AJ Ajayi, should not have been on the team, right? So a lot of these players he came back and gave money to because it was in his heart. He's a good guy. But they were older, they were slower, right? And so it kind of affected the team in a negative way. But this is where that concept came from. This was actually, in my experience, the first time I've seen how we successfully do the plug and play with cheaper, older, more experienced guys. And it actually went successfully, right? And so we actually won. We won our championship here. Then the next year, there is scrutiny. We insert the quarterback factory, where he publicly comes out and say, hey, we're a quarterback factory. We're going to draft quarterbacks every year. Insert Jalen Hurts. Now, Jalen Hurts, to my knowledge, right, I don't want to say that Howie's seen something in Carson Wentz, or maybe there was locker room issues that he read the tea leaves in and said this is going to be a problem moving forward. But to my knowledge, he drafted Jalen Hurts because, hey, yes, that's probably the best person on the board. He's a quarterback. We can develop him, and Carson Wentz is now developing an injury problem, right? This is a guy who still can run. He can run the offense. He's a winner. He's a high IQ guy, and he comes from a good school, SEC school, or the Big Ten, which is Oklahoma, when he got drafted. And so this is a guy who fits the mold of what Howie is looking at. So to me, I didn't think it was we're getting Carson Wentz out of here move, but I thought it was a move that could be both, right? This is a guy who can help us win in the case Carson Wentz goes down, because Nick Foles has now got his bag and he's in the Rams or freaking the Colts, wherever he went. He got his bag. We can't afford that. And if in the event Carson Wentz doesn't work out or flame out or something, we can fall back on Jalen Hurts. As we've seen currently, this is what's happening. And so as the roster construction continues to build, we're going to fast forward to next season, and then we're going to point out some of the roster moves that I think Howie Roseman start developing. And now you can see the psyche and his maturity, right, coming to life. So the next year after we win the chip, obviously we go on a slide. We don't go back to the playoffs. And, things just start to go downhill, as I mentioned, with Carson Wentz. You can see there's older guys on this roster that's just like, it's time to move on, but Howie's not moving on, right? Michael Bennett is on this roster. Haloti Naha, who shouldn't even been on this roster because he's too old. And then there's stopgap guys who just weren't good enough, but are high IQ guys, right? Kamarji Grugier-Hill, right, who's actually made a good career for himself after moving on. Jalen Mills is still on the roster. We know now that Jalen Mills is not it. Ronald Darby was trash around this time. He was trash during the Super Bowl era, actually. But he was trash around this time, and we know he shouldn't have been on the roster. Corey Graham's on the back end. These are guys that are stopgaps and not it, right? Not it, but it's saving a little money because we got bigger stars now. So as I'm looking at the roster, the first time I see, all right, a guy who is a go-getter, a great athlete, come from a smaller school, doesn't matter, but I'm prioritizing athleticism because we need to get younger, faster, stronger, is Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert, to me, was the first guy Howie said, you know what, we need to get younger, faster, stronger. I'm going to prioritize athleticism. Not high IQ, not high character, not good smart schools. I'm going to prioritize athleticism and insert Dallas Goedert. And now, 5 years, 6 years later, we've seen Dallas Goedert. Yes, he is injury prone, but he's been an asset. And now you can start to see the transfer from, okay, we're going to get good character guys and plug and play with old vets around them to, no, we need to get younger, bigger, faster, stronger athletes in here. And that starts with good Dallas Goedert. And I'm going to point out over time some more players like this so you can start to see where his trajectory starts to go. So we're in the next year, 2019, and we want to talk about draft picks and different things like that and the type of players that Howie is looking at. So remember, if you remember, Brandon Graham didn't have the best start to his year, right? And so he wanted, but he came on, obviously being the Super Bowl MVP type of caliber player, getting a strip sack to seal a game. So he's looking like, okay, this is Howie. He's looking as if he wants to start to replace these guys. He know they're getting older, but we want to replace them. They've been successful in our scheme. Let's find guys in the mold of these successful players. Like I told you, Halaputi Vaitai is in the mold of Jason Peters or, Lane Johnson. Even Lane Johnson was drafted to be in the mold of Jason Peters. Jason Peters just stuck around for an extra 1,000 years, right? But we see here that there's a battle between being smart, high character guys, but then also we looking for athletes, right? So I mentioned Dallas Goedert. That was my first time seeing him going after a straight athlete. But then we got J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who we all know is right above. We missed out the pick for freaking whoever it was, right? DK Metcalf. We picked what's the guy name from TCU? It doesn't even matter. Jalen Reagor over JJ, right? So we know how he picked these high caliber IQ guys, high character guys, but not necessarily the best athlete on the field, right? So that's proven with that JJ Arcega-Whiteside. That's proven with Jalen Reagor. And also Jannard Avery. Remember, Jannard Avery came in to try to replace the Brandon Graham. He's in the mode of the Brandon Graham. Shorter, more stumpier, solid type of guy who was supposed to defend the run and maybe give us some athletic play, hold down the edge, and get some sacks, right? It flamed out. To be honest, it flamed out. All of his picks right now are flaming out in this area. And so this is the time where we're like, you know what, and maybe it's time to move on from Howie, right? Maybe it's time to move on from Howie. But we've seen that he just got a promotion, or he's just about to get a promotion to executive vice president and general manager, right? After you win that Super Bowl, you got a little stain on your chest. You can pump your chest out a little bit. And so this is where we see Howie Roseman really take over after he learns, like, okay, look, the way I've been doing it is not going to get it done. We need to go to the SEC. We need to get players that's bigger, faster, stronger. We need to take a chance on players with character issues. We need to take a chance on players that may have been injured, and we need to figure this out. And we need to get on the ball because the league is leaving us behind, even though we are a little bit successful. We need to reinvent this team. Insert the Philly Georgia Bulldogs. Now, look, it's not just about the Georgia Bulldogs because there's a lot here to unpack outside of just players from Georgia. You look at Josh Sweat, who is a very, very outstanding college defensive end edge player. He just had knee issues, right? He blew out his knee. We took a chance on him out of the SEC, out of Florida State, and look what he turned out to be. Very, very successful, right? So he started to say, you know what? I need to go where the grass is greener. I need to go where these players are already big time, right? Insert the SEC. You look at Devontae Smith, Heisman Trophy winner. You blow the chance to get Justin Jefferson, and you blow the chance to get DK Metcalf, and you blow the chance to get all of these other top tier receivers. And you say, you know what, I'm not going to do that again. There's a guy right out of the SEC, Devontae Smith, Heisman Trophy winner. I'm going to pick him. Excuse me. We build in the trenches. Insert Jordan Davis, right? We build in the trenches. SEC guy who has been mauling the trenches out of the SEC, the biggest, fastest, strongest, arguably. I'm a Big Ten guy, but arguably the SEC is the biggest, fastest, strongest conference in the country. Excuse me. And with that, we have a guy who's absolutely mauled the offensive and defensive lineman trenches in Jordan Davis. Let's go after Jordan Davis. Let's go after the best linebacker in football out of the SEC on that number one team defense in the country. Let's go after one of the best edge rushers out of that team in the country. Let's go after the best defensive lineman in the country out of Georgia, out of the SEC, and Jalen Carter right here, right? And then you look at Kelee Ringo. Kelee Ringo, if you look at some mocks, was projected to be anywhere between a 2 and a 3. Some even had him at a 1. I've seen some mock drafts that had Kelee Ringo going first round, right? Most of them I've seen 2 or 3. We were able to get him in the 4th round. That's a super steal. SEC guy, Georgia Bulldog. Now, it is amazing that all these guys come from the one school, right? If you're going to do it, get it from one school. They all got high character, right? Even Jalen Carter, who has his issues, he's not like a thug or anything like that. He's not labeled as that. He just went through something. At most, you might call him a little immature. But when you look at it, he got his guys around him to reel him back in, right? This is what you want in a team, not a professional team or not a college team, but a team in general. You want these guys to hold each other accountable. And then you have the mainstays in the locker room: Jason Kelsey, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Lane Johnson, Zach Ertz, even Dallas Goedert at this time is a little older, right? So you got these guys in the locker room who's going to reel them in and say, yo, listen, young buck, we can't do that. But then you also got these 6 or 7 guys at this point who are coming together, who have played together for years, since they were 18 years old, have played together. So at this point, it's probably about 4 to 5, maybe even 6 different, years that they played together, with that chemistry, with that know-how, that stick-to-itiveness, to know how to talk to each other, know how to get the most out of each other, to help each other get acclimated to a new city, get acclimated to a new playbook, bring each other up. So all of that actually matters, and how we took that into consideration. I want young players who are bigger, faster, stronger, and have chemistry, that have a high IQ and can come in and control the locker room. That's what the type of guys I want. When I look at Azeez Ojulari, our new signing, former Georgia Bulldog, right? But he's someone who's going to automatically have that culture, that winning culture, because, he's on national championship teams. He knows these guys. He knows how to play with these guys. It's not going to take long for him to plug and play. You look at Jeff Uche. Yeah, he's not a Georgia Bulldog, but he's in the same mold of a Brandon Graham, right? Someone who is going to come in, make sure he knows what he's doing, get acclimated with the system, and go ball on a cheap deal. All of these deals are value based, right? If they hit, we could possibly re-sign them, or we can let them go. Or if they don't, we can let them go at little cost. So that's a little bit of the value and the maturity of Howie, right, that I've seen my research, how Howie went from learning from under Andy Reid, building through the trenches, to taking, what type of player do I want, and to build my system around what type of physical traits and attributes do they need to have, to ultimately figuring it out on his own, okay, I need to get rid of the vets. We need to get younger, faster, stronger. So when we go through this process here of changing our team, getting younger, faster, stronger, opening up the salary cap, opening up the acquiring all these draft picks, it doesn't surprise me, because this is who Howie Roseman is, and I can see the maturation of where he come from, and I know the plan for the future. Man, this is King Talk Sports. I'll see you on the other side.